Oh, wow. Deja vu.
Hello.
Hey, who is this?
This is Guy,
Oh,
actually, not
Guy.
Guy.
Oh, Guy
Okay.
from Windsor. Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome. We can hear you.
Good.
Okay, that's fine.
What?
So, do you have a definition of godhood?
No, I don't.
It's because you see, once I got involved a little bit with atheism, I sort of realized that most atheists are being blindsided in a way by a theist. Because if you don't have any definition of godhood, what makes for God, then anyone can come along and tell you, oh, this is God, or this is God, and this is God, and you end up having to fight all sorts of battle about all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, that's the
And
reality of it.
you don't get anywhere. But if you had a definition of godhood, what makes for God, then you can at least simplify the whole thing, right?
How
Because
do you get
then
people to agree with it?
Yeah, that's the problem, is agreeing on one common definition.
Like, I mean, I could walk around and say, I have this definition of God, and this is the definition of God that everyone must adopt in order to talk to me about God. And if I said, let's say that I said, this is my definition of God, and I give a definition, and then I say, that's the God that I reject, and someone else says, well, do you accept my God? Because my God's not like that. And then I'm going to have all those same arguments again, won't I?
uh, in a way, yes, but let's say we put it.
Are you there, Guy?
Oh, yes, it's because I'm trying to listen to the broadcast.
Oh, you
Uh,
might want to turn
so,
that down and
Yeah,
just
just
listen
listen
to
through your
us.
phone.
sorry.
That's okay.
Well, let's put it another way. Like, let's say instead of talking about God, we're going to talk about, say, tomatoes. Now, if I want to talk about tomatoes, but you don't know what tomatoes are, right? Then the very first thing we have to do is agree on what tomatoes are. Because if we don't even agree on what tomatoes
That's not
are,
a good example, Guy. We should stick to an example that is conceptual because that's what God is. So let's say for example love. All right, that we want to talk about love. That
love is it's a little different because it's not something we necessarily agree with. But
just
what
like
about
God.
knighthood? Knighthood would be a better
No,
sort
because
of.
knighthood you qualify. There are qualifiers for that. What I'm saying is the God, most people who believe in God will agree that they don't have something to point to like a tomato. So they're talking about a conceptual, that they're starting with a conceptual definition, and they will admit to that. So I have to stick with something that's conceptual, and that's why I threw out love. But I can't really go with something for which we have like exacting parameters because God is in fact a concept, and there are different concepts of God held by different people, and you could try to come up with commonalities to that. Certainly, if somebody came to me and said, my pencil is God, I would be like, well, that is so far outside the range of what is generally accepted by anybody as a God that I just think that's a ridiculous claim. That shouldn't even be included in the theistic atheist debate. But when you're comparing it to something tangible, certainly I think the reason there are a million different concepts of God is because we don't have a God to point to like we have a tomato. If there was, we had this discussion, I think last time I was on, somebody was asking about why don't, I forget how they put it, but I was trying to explain to them, if you don't have that pointer, if you don't have that thing that you can point to, I have nothing to compare it to, and so everybody has their own concept here.
Okay, I'll go along with your idea of concepts. Uh, every word that we have is in a way stands for a concept of some sort, right?
Sure.
Okay, so whatever the concept that we decide to talk about, whatever it's love or knighthood or even godhood, the idea here is that, say, here I am now in Windsor, I can have any definition of tomatoes, love, God, or tool sheds that I want, right?
I think
But
it's a little different when you're talking about love versus a tomato, because a tomato, we actually have tangible examples that we can observe and study and examine. With love, we have some very basic aspects of it that we can examine, right? I mean, we have brain reactions
really
that we
agree
would
with you, except that the next step, once I have my definition of whatever, right? As soon as I start talking to you or anyone else, we have to agree on some common grounds, right?
Yes, that's why we ask people when they call to explain what they believe and why they believe it.
Okay, and this is where the definition of godhood comes in, the same as the definition of love. Let's say you insist on love, that's fine. But in order to talk about love, we do have to talk about what we mean by love. For instance, it tends to be very hard in this day and age to define love, but there are some basic agreements. For instance, if I love someone, I'm not going to go and punch them in the mouth, right? I'm not
No, I
going to
don't think
hurt
there is
them.
agreement on that. I think there are some people who think that they love you so much that if you tried to leave them, they would kill you.
Yeah, but then you have to dig a little deeper into, say, human relationships. What makes for a positive human
Sailing
relationship?
through the heart of cities and landscapes
Let's say
with Viking, you'll see things differently.
I
I'm sorry, I'm getting some weird sound,
We're getting some weird audio. I don't know where that's coming from.
and I'm having trouble hearing the caller. Like, I don't know, it's very quiet.
Is it? You can control the volume there. Are you still there, Guy?
with
Okay, that's better.
okay, I'm using Ustream, and they keep coming up with those
Oh, it's an ad.
commercials.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get rid of them.
Okay.
But the idea
Just turn your
here is
volume down on your
what
computer.
we hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the idea here is that whatever concepts we have to agree on them before we can talk about them.
Yes, that's why we ask people what they believe and why they believe it.
Okay, now if you're going to talk about God or love or whatever, but let's stick to the idea of God, because that's the theme of the show, I guess. The idea is that we should have a common definition of it. Now, if you talk to someone who says, oh, it's my definition of God, I don't care about what anyone else's definition of God is, then you know you're talking about someone who may not want to communicate, or someone who may not be rational. But at least you know you're not, it's pointless to talk to them, you're not going to get anywhere. So if you talk about someone who's going to be talking about God, the very first thing you have to do is sort of agree on a definition of God, which is the sort of heart of my question, a definition of godhood, similar to a definition of knighthood. Like you may want to talk about a knight with a horse and armor, and he's saving damsels in distress, right? But you can also talk about some other knight who has achieved something worthwhile in a modern society, does not even ride a horse.
Right.
And what brings all of this together is that we have a definition of knighthood, which is someone who's been knighted by a monarch. So we can talk about what seems to be at first very different people, but they have a common ground and we can relate to it. Same as God. If you have a definition of godhood, then you can talk about all sorts of different gods, but know that you're still talking about gods, and maybe you choose to one particular God over another one.
I guess I'm trying to figure out here, like, how do I get to tell somebody what God they believe in or don't believe in? So if a Catholic comes to me and they're telling me that they believe in God and they want to talk about God, and I say, God, whatever.
Well,
gods are mortal.
Yeah,
if they don't drink the ambrosia, they die. And if you don't believe that, then the thing you believe in isn't God. I mean, the Catholic's not going to roll over for that.
Yeah, but if you start the discussion by asking them what their definition of godhood is.
That's what we do.
No, you ask them what their definition of God is. It's a little like if I say I defined you, okay? I say, okay, you're a woman, you're from Texas. But by talking about you as a woman from Texas who is the host of a show, that does not define women in general, right?
Right, but this is most people are not believing in other people's gods. They have their own concept of God that they adhere to. I don't know anybody that adheres to multiple
Yeah.
concepts of gods.
Yeah, but that's why they have to have faith, because they themselves don't have a definition of godhood. So the work to be done is to actually come up with a definition of what makes a god. For instance, let's say that one of the characteristics of God would be ultimate, right?
I don't know what that means.
Ultimate.
What does
I
that
mean,
mean?
well, look it up in a dictionary. It means
Well,
there's nothing beyond that. That's the most of the most.
I disagree with your aspect there, your metric. Apollo was not ultimate, but he was a god.
Actually, he was ultimate if you.
No, he wasn't. He actually, there were other gods that could supersede him. There were times when he would go head to head with some of the other gods and lose. How is he ultimate?
Yeah, but you see, one, you tell me you don't have definition of godhood. Two, you decide that one god can be more powerful than another god, so that the other god that it's not quite as powerful as the first god is not a god. So it doesn't make sense here.
No, what I'm saying is that you had a pantheon in Greece where they had gods. The people worshipped the gods. Everybody agreed these were gods, and yet sometimes the gods went head to head, and one would get their way and the other one wouldn't. And
So
those were
the-
gods. I
So
don't think
the idea of having one god more powerful than another god does not belong in the definition of godhood.
But all of them would beat each other at different times. I mean, even Zeus didn't get his way all the time.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
that's
but that's true. But what makes Zeus a god and Apollo a god, just as
Because they
Zeus
were
was
immortal
God?
and superhuman. Like, that's pretty much what the Greeks observed and called a god. It was immortal and superhuman.
obviously the Greeks didn't agree that an aspect of godhood is being ultimate. So that's exactly the problem that we started out saying, is that there's no way you could get agreement, I don't think, on any facet
Yeah.
of what godhood is.
And what do you do with demigods? Like, what do you do with the half man, half god? What do you do with Hercules? Right? I mean, is that a god? Is that he's mortal, but he's, but he's half god? So what is that? I mean,
Then we had to go to what I call the next step: ultimate, but in what way, right? Because if the strength of the god does not matter, he's still a god, even though he may be weaker than another god, or a goddess is a woman, whereas Zeus is a man, but they're still both gods. Then this ultimate has to be refined a little bit.
yeah, and that's my problem, though, is that any metric that you're going to lay down is
gonna
going to
have
have to
that
be
problem.
refined, because there's going to be
Okay.
somebody that's shifting
Okay.
and they don't use
How
that
about
metric.
this one refinement, as you call it, authority, ultimate authority? Those could be two nice little refinements for the definition of godhood, wouldn't
But
they?
did Apollo have ultimate authority if he could sometimes get his ass kicked? I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, is like, how do if I can find gods that we agree as humanity were worshipped as gods, these were gods, but they're not adhering to these particular structures. I mean, I don't think that absolutely anything can be classified as a god. But I do think that among the concepts of God, there is so much diversity that you really just have to let the person coming to you tell you what it is they're talking about. And then if you want to say, wow, that's so outside the range of, what anyone has ever worshipped or labeled as a god, that I don't, you're out on a limb by yourself there, like, I'm not even worrying about that concept. But when it comes to even common conceptions of God, historically and modern, they are all over the map within that concept.
Let's refine it a little bit more.
Why?
Then.
I guess I'm asking why. Why am I defining this for other people? Why don't I let the person who's coming to me and they believe in God tell me what it is they believe in, and then we have a conversation from there?
Because if you don't have a definition of your own, then you cannot have.
How do I have a definition for something I don't even think exists?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you cannot say that it doesn't exist if you don't have a definition to
I don't
look
believe
for.
that it exists, because all of the claims that have been brought to me have failed to convince me that they are correct. And so when I say that I don't believe in God, I'm saying I don't believe in any of the God claims that have so far been put forward to me, any that I'm aware of.
Okay, and that brings us back to what I said at first. If you don't have a definition of godhood, you have to deal with every case on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, you
like
do have to.
All the claims.
Yes, you do.
I guess I don't see what the problem with that is. That seems like the natural
Different
way
people
to discuss.
have different gods, and I don't get to dictate. If you start telling people this is what your God must be, they're just going to tell you.
No. You don't dictate to people. It's a little like, say...
Well, then I'm letting them tell me what they think. I'm not getting this.
Yeah, but what I'm driving at is that it's like for every word you have to have a sort of consensus, right? Otherwise, people won't be able to communicate. If I want to talk about cars, right, you have an idea what cars are, and we can talk about it. If I want to talk about trees, right, you have an idea what trees are, and we can talk about it.
Yes, because we can observe those things, but God is not like that. Right? God is purely conceptual. If they could bring a God to me and show it to me, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
How
right?
can you say that God is only conceptual when you don't even have a definition of godhood?
Because other people's definitions are conceptual. I'm reacting to claims. That's what the atheism is. It's a response to a theistic claim.
Yeah, but since you're responding to particular and subjective claims as to what God is, you're not talking about God, you're talking about an interpretation of what God
You
may
could say the same thing about love.
Yeah, but if the person is wrong...
How do you be wrong? It's their concept. They can't be wrong about what their
Well, of course you can be
is.
wrong. I mean, people are not always right. They can be
If somebody
wrong.
tells me this is what I think love is, right? Like Jim says this is what Jim thinks love is, Jim's telling me what's in Jim's head with regard to love. I can't tell him he's wrong. I can tell him I don't agree with that that's not what I would call love, or I think that's like a weird, way to express your love by killing your partner because you were so obsessed with them. But I do understand that there are some people who view it that way. So I have to accept that within the realm of the way people look at love, there are some people that look at it that way.
So what you're saying is that someone can be wrong and you have to accept it without
I'm not calling him wrong.
any need to correct.
I'm saying that if
there's no standard to judge by which it's right or wrong.
Show me the God, and I'll tell you whether or not they're wrong. Right? But it's like if they have a concept in their head and they're describing it to me, how are they? It's like if they come to me and tell me they're sad, they're not wrong. I don't get this. I'm going to have to say, I don't know where this is going. Feel free to post at our blog. I would say you might want to go to the Free Thought Blogs /AXP, and there's an open show thread for this show. And I'm going to go ahead and direct you to go ahead and sort of type this up and post it as a comment on our blog. If you're not if you haven't posted on the blog before, you'll have to wait for a little bit. An administrator will have to come and clear the comment. So you might not see it immediately, but I think that this is a deeper discussion. This could easily take the entire show, and I think it's probably better dealt with in a group forum at the blog where people can respond to this, because I'm not sure that I'm following this, and it sounds to me like something that won't fly. But I might not be understanding it correctly, and maybe you can expound on it over there in more detail. And at a greater length, and maybe even for a longer span of time. But for now, we've got a couple other calls that we need to get to, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go.
Yeah, you want me to send you my definition of godhood?
If you want to post it at the blog, sure. There will be a show thread for this show for Tracy and John on, episode, I think it's like 953 or something like that. But if you go to the blog, it'll be the first blog post, and you can put a comment in there and describe this concept for the other viewers, and the hosts also can see it then as well.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Well, sorry I didn't quite maybe wrap my head around where we were going with that, but I appreciate your call.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy. We appreciate it.
Yeah.